right from the construction to utilities, maintenance, and every aspect of the present habitats is a big challenge, as well as creating future cities or providing habitations with less ecological footprints and carbon footprints is also an important aspect. Then how do we adapt to this global warming? The increased greenhouse gases scenario is already existing. And with increased temperatures and urban heat island concept is already there. And within the urban areas, the increased temperatures will not make the cities livable. And this is again a big challenge that we are seeing already in many even higher latitudes. The average temperatures have gone, especially during the peak time like summers, more than 45 degrees we are witnessing. So I think in the whole context of the resources utilization, the food securities, and the habitations, sustainability, we have a challenge, and we would like to listen today from the experts. So first, I would like to invite Dr. Suchit uh, Reddy. Uh, he is a chartered engineer by qualification in civil engineering and is an expert in the areas of sustainable construction, materials, technologies, and management, and is having multi-criteria decision-making techniques, fuzzy logics, and life cycle assessments of building materials. He has published more than 30 papers in the areas of reputed international journals. He also acts as a reviewer for some of the CSCI and Scopus indexed journals like Tyco and Francis, sorry. Uh, and he has having several other honors to his credit. And presently, he has completed his master's from the UK in 2010 and a PhD from NIT Warangal in India before research and teaching. And he's having a very good profile, most relevant to this present topic. Welcome, sir. You can continue your talk.
Today's conference, today's gathering, basically we required to have a great challenge towards the COP26. We have been conducting this great initiative on this. I'm very much glad to have this session where we have given the topic on sustainable construction and then the carbon neutral construction industry and the climate resilient infrastructure which has been transforming now to conventional system to resilient infrastructure systems. So today we are faced up with many global housing challenges where it has been gone worse of the impacts caused by the human wars towards the climate crisis. So you can see this picture where the adverse effects of the humans, the habitants, which is coming across throughout the world, and not only habitants but the flora and fauna in and around the sea and oceans on the world and on the earth. They're tremendously being focused by this climate change. But the climate change, we see the threat we face to the health of the people is making adverse effects on human. So the impacts of this human-induced climate change are drastically increasing in India as well as the nation, the worldwide. just because of the rising temperatures, the rise in greenhouse gas concentrations, the changes in the precipitation, the changes in the frequent changes in the weather. If you see, recently we have a lot of floods and droughts, the changes in the climate. So this makes the lot of effects on the food, water resources, the air we breathe, as well as the weather we experience. So thus the interaction between the built environment, the natural environment, and the climate change is a critical thing. So the risks we face as a human to grow in the sustainable development, in the form of sustainable development, is far better than the conventional system we face. Most of the emissions you come across is from the industries, majorly from the construction industry. So this reduction in construction, the carbon emissions associated with the residential, commercial, industrial, and any other critical things in the construction industry. So this reduction we must do so far in such a way that it should not exaggerate the global crisis. So this reduction, not only because of the housing, the infrastructure we develop, the critical crisis we interact with the housing and the people to the climate, and climate to the industry. These cannot be solved in a solution isolation, but rather they can be they can take the prioritize the needs of the families who are really required to impacted what the vulnerable climate changes. So this picture shows the overall impact on the climate change of different areas to different um, habitants. It could be habitat on the water, habitat in the water, habitat in the ground, earth, and so on. Coming to this basic picture of global warming, climate change, causes and effects, and the how this is transforming because of the effect on the humans. So the people, the housing for the people, and the climate crisis, these are all interrelated. So they cannot be resolved uh, differently, but they cannot be isolated, but rather um, they'll be giving the opportunities or effects that prioritize the needs of the families. Oh, so the IPCC can understand here. They have made clear that the action towards the reduction in carbon emissions is very much needed over the next few decades, next two more decades. So this can be curbed significantly by taking few actions on the type of construction, the process of construction, the materials we use, and the way the building is designed. So as a part of this, the matter of this, what we can do is the building sector, because of the opportunity to reduce the carbon footprint from the buildings during construction or in the operation stage, there are two things we have to understand here. One is the operation stage and the pre-operation stage, that is embodied carbons, what we release from the materials we use. So the urgent action we require here is to address the housing, the basic needs, adequate needs of the housing globally, and improve the living conditions. So the quality of the life here of most of the people are vulnerable towards the climate. So the households, while addressing the need for the sustainable construction and reducing the carbon emission, will result in the construction which is of net zero buildings. So in order to ensure these efforts to reduce the carbon emissions, we don't have to raise the cost of the housing here. We don't have to raise the cost of the land. But in spite that, we can able to design a building in such a way that it is not emitting emissions in the operation stage. Or the pre-construction stage, if you are not using any high embodied energy materials, then you can simply reduce the carbon emissions and call it as a carbon neutral building. So the centers like the KPR foundations and CGR, which is calling for the urgent need for sustainable construction and the ways the strategies they use to provoke the people. This will mitigate the carbon emission efforts in the built environment. Thereby, the housing sector, which is here, they can ensure two ways to develop a good sustainable buildings. Now you can see the effects of environment and the effects of human over the causes and the greenhouse gases. Thereby, the acidification which is causing on the environment, which is making us the recent rainfalls. These recent rainfalls, even can understand, these are heavily addressed because of the human effects we face. So whatever the carbon dioxide which is released inside, whatever the sulfur dioxide or carbon monoxides will react with the UV radiations of the sun, thereby causing the acidification, the process of evapotranspiration, and then the acidification will come into place. This will create a lot of disturbances in the extreme weather conditions like hurricanes, floods, droughts. This in turn creates the life loss in the life, and loss in the resources what we generate from the earth. You can understand the Earth Overshoot Day is one of the concepts we generally see. Every year, the Earth will generate on its own the resources. Those resources will be utilized by the various uh, people, where the regeneration of these resources will take some time. So the day on which the resources get depleted on the Earth for every year is called as Earth Overshoot Day. So just because of the pandemic, we could at least increase this day from July 29th in 2020 to August in 2021. So by August, somewhere on the week of the August, all the resources which are generated by the earth, we have been consuming it. And remaining days from August to December, we have been using those resources for the next year. But still, we are on a harder side where we are still using the next year's generation of earth resource generations, even we are using in this year only. The day will come where we have to understand the resource generation will get completely depleted. Then there could be adverse efforts on the nature. For these, a human has major concerns. Causes could be the fossil fuels, the greenhouse gases. Thereby, it is forming a global warming effect on the climate. The change in climate creates a lot of efforts. You can see on the right side of this picture, the adverse effects. And this kind of efforts now came into as a feedback. So this is nothing but a just like hydrological cycle. Every human has its own effect on the global change, as well as the climate change is also giving some effects on the human. So it is interlinked. So if you just like what we say, respect others, others will respect you. In a similar manner, human now giving adverse effects to the nature, now same is reflecting in the form of the impacts that we can understand from this figure. So for this, the only option we can go for is create a better future by achieving the carbon neutral buildings. The carbon neutral buildings are nothing but we will reduce the carbon dioxide emitted from the buildings. As we know that if we can able to focus on the design aspects, can able to focus on the material aspects, can able to focus on the use of renewable resources, renewable energy, then we can definitely achieve this concept of carbon neutral buildings and carbon neutral construction. So in simple words, in order to reduce the climate impact on the project, we need to define a clear targets at early stages. So these clear targets should be mainly focusing on the renewable energy, should be mainly focusing on the carbon storage. That means we have to use materials which can store the carbon, and thereby the renewable resource of the offsite we can use. So the conventional system on to your left side, we see operation energy is a lot of having carbon emissions. Next to it, construction part and the building materials. So these are equivalent carbon dioxide which is emitted from different stages now. On to your right, we can able to balance this. In spite of emitting the carbons, we can restore them. We can restore while utilizing the energy. So both ways we're getting benefited. So this could be a balanced carbon neutral constructive part, where though we design the materials and choices, we can create the efficient buildings with low energy use, where the energy needed or required is supplied from the renewable energy resources, and the energy demand which we require can be reduced by optimizing the building volume, the orientation part, or the building envelope we call, by using the passive design techniques. So this will specifically speak on the energy efficiency of the building, services, and the controlling and monitoring of the building. So this can be achieved using these 6 steps which are stated on the right side, very simply. So define your target, that is to minimize the carbon neutral, agree the carbon budget, in spite, just like your economical budget, how the building is performing in terms of carbon budgeting, and follow this for the same for the next projects. So this could be a benchmark. This could be a some kind of strategics you can compare with other buildings. So minimizing the materials, use of the materials, that means increasing the metal efficiency, thereby reducing the energy demand. So you choose a material which is performing well. At the same time, you should choose a material which can be replaceable, which can be reusable, which can be recyclable. This will make sure that the virgin material cannot be used further. So minimal use of virgin material can be done. So that could be one of the concept of 3 Rs, 3 Rs and 5 Rs concept, which can be in implemental position in the construction industry. So achieve this carbon neutral construction part, we have to integrate the design process. So the integration in terms of optimizing the building envelope for low energy needs, integrating with the recent technologies we want, and prioritizing those energy which are renewable and efficient. Thereby you can reduce the heat gain into the building and heat loss in the building. That depends on the regional variations. You can able to use the solar panels for the different purposes. A kickstart for the carbon neutral construction. Then ultimately the materials we use will makes a lot of difference at the end of the day. The right materials you choose based upon the environmental data, that is we call it as environmental product declaration. We use materials which are recyclable, renewable, reduced carbon emissions, which is on par with the conventional materials. So thereby it is satisfying the functional requirements of the building as well as the environmental and social and economical requirements. Altogether, we define this target as a climate impact to clarify how the consequence of building is focused, and then draft the carbon budget. This carbon budget can stimulate the building process in reducing the carbon dioxide emissions. So this indicator was very much required as of now, which a need of the hour, which is the need of the hour to achieve the carbon neutral buildings and construction. And this is all for my side, sir. Thank you very much.
Professor Shailaja Nagulapati, Madam, she is an assistant professor at SPCA, Sri Venkateshwara College of Architecture College for the last 5 years, and is having an industrial experience of 11 years. She has done Masters in Environmental Design from JNF AU, Hyderabad, done her Bachelor's from Nagpur University. She has also done a course on housing policies and planning from IIT Roorkee. Thank you, madam. Now you could start your presentation.
By telling how sustainably you can actually reduce the carbon footprint at a building level. So when we talk about the carbon footprint, it is the total amount of greenhouse gases that are released into the atmosphere with human activities. So these human activities are basically the by food consumption, transportation, and other household energy that is released into the atmosphere. So by this, a lot of CO2 or infrared radiations are actually released into the atmosphere, by which we have greenhouse effect. Due to this greenhouse effect, we have climate change in the environment. So when we talk about climate change, it's basically the alterations into the temperature and the weather of any particular place. One of the major impacts of this climate change is the carbon footprint, that is, or the CO2 levels that are released into the atmosphere. So when we talk about the CO2 levels, the total amount of the CO2 that is released into the atmosphere is due to the constructions, the manufacturing and the transportation of various products, and also because of the demolition when you talk about the building before building period. And then once the building is in use, the building energy released during the usage is also a lot of energy is emitted, which increases the carbon dioxide gases and creates the greenhouse effect and the climate change. So when we talk about building level, as we were just talking, that transportation, demolition waste and manufacturing materials create a lot of disturbance into the atmosphere. At the same time, the electricity consumption and on-site consumption, water and waste management are also equally contributing. So basically to solve this or make a carbon neutral building or a carbon balanced building, we basically need to have a balance between the energy used before and after. So we have to have a mitigation for the same. So I have few points on which we can actually, strike a balance for both. This balance can be struck, as Sir was also talking about, that use of renewable resources. These all renewable resources like wind, solar, water, solid waste, all these basically do generate electricity for us, but then they have a lot more potential with them as such. Like, for example, wind helps us making the indoors very comfortable, helps us improve the indoor air quality. At the same time, solar, that is the sunlight, basically helps us achieve the natural daylight for our space, by which both we can reduce the dependence on the active or the artificial sources of light and wind, or for basically we can just use these and supplement or dependence on our active energies that today we are using. So when we use such renewable resources, we basically are reducing the carbon energy that is released into the atmosphere. At the same time, we are balancing or achieving the human comfort indoors with the help of the renewable sources of energy. Also, at a community level, as we see, we basically can, as Chandigarh was a community level or sector-based design, those kind of things are now again being circulated, like new smart cities and smart city concepts and all are getting promoted these days. Like you have Naya Raipur, Navi Mumbai, then you have the new Amravati that is coming up also on the basis of the similar concept, which basically promotes the community level housing. Now, when we talk about a community level housing, these basically have cities or townships or spaces, the residential spaces which have a good connect or proximity to all these amenities like schools, parks, playgrounds, hospitals, work areas, shopping, and all these. So basically the transportation is reduced. As we all know, that transportation is also a very important aspect for the release of carbon dioxide and other pollutants into the atmosphere, which basically is increasing the carbon emissions into the atmosphere and contributing a lot to the greenhouse effect today. So if this kind of thing is promoted, basically we are helping reducing the transportation, and in which we are basically reducing the carbon footprint again. Then use of solar passive technologies is one of the major things that can be done at building level to reduce the carbon emissions. Now, basically, when we talk about a building design, it starts with the orientation of a building or orientation of the building on the site, which is something very basic, and which is decided on the basis of the sun movement and sun orientation. Once all that is fixed, then comes to the designing of a space. Yeah. Now, once you fix the orientation of a building, then the major two parts are the ventilation and the light. So for ventilation, as we know that 24 hours of fresh air movement is a very prime and important thing for any building, by which we improve the indoor air quality. We also increase the comfort zone of we achieve the comfort zone of the space by having a proper ventilation to a space. So cross ventilation is decided on the movement of the wind, according to which we need to plan our openings. Once the openings are planned, if we don't have a proper shading, a lot of glare could come inside your space. So this can be catered with the providing a lot of proper shading. Now, when we talk about shading, we have a combination of shading that can be used: the overhangs, the vertical fins, a combination of both that we know as accurate design shading, or also we have a lot of chhajjas that are at angles, or we have them at the fins that are at angles, so which helps us get the required amount of sunlight and the depending on the space that we are designing for. At the same time, when we talk about a span of structure where the indoor is about 10 meters wide or more, when we provide windows, we get a hardly space of about 4-5 meters that can be lit. But then the center part is always a problem area, because then we need to support it with artificial lighting. So that can be actually overcome by providing light shelves, where we use the sunlight, and the deflection of the light can be given into the space, which helps us light the indoors properly. But if by all these means, we actually can achieve our human comfort if it is well designed. But if we don't have a proper building envelope, all this is pointless, because if the thermal mass is more, if you're getting more heat gains from outside, even if you're comforting it inside, is waste. Putting in so much of thought to the designing is waste. So proper building envelope also is a big contributor for achieving the comfort levels or comfort zones at a building level. So the point here is, if you have a properly well-designed building with the renewable sources and proper light ventilation, you ultimately are achieving your thermal comfort. Once you achieve your thermal comfort, or once your indoor is around 24 to 26 degrees, your dependency on the active sources like air conditioners or coolers is reduced. So your energy emissions are less. So your carbon dioxide exiting outside is also reduced at the same time. So you are going green. You are making your building a green building. Once this is there, we also have some strategies that we use normally as an evaporative cooling or a stack effect, or earth air tunnels that can be used, where you basically are kind of pushing in the hot air, making the indoors cooler, or you're taking in basically the cool air from the pool or a water body and getting the cooler air inside. So in case of an earth air tunnel, you basically are in all these things, basically you're dropping your wind temperature by 2-3 degrees and then flushing it into your space. So you are naturally letting the cool space enter your building. So you are dropping the indoor temperature, or giving a cooler breeze inside. So all these measures basically help you achieve the natural comfort space inside, or indoor space is comfortable. So dependency is naturally getting reduced when it comes to active energy usage. Now here, if you see, you have a proper use of stack effects, then you have ventilation, cross buildings, you have lots of green spaces around, which help you for give you a proper shade to the spaces. At the same time, you're using a proper angled sun, you're providing your spaces aptly so that you have a proper comfortable spaces. This is just for explaining you how the basic thing works. Now, when we say water, water is also a very important renewable source. But today, as you see, all the water bodies around us are toxically polluted. I mean, you cannot use the water that is available in the water bodies right away. But if we use the water that is coming to us naturally, it is going to solve half our problems. Now, when I say when you use it naturally, that means the rainwater is considered to be the purest form of water. But we are not conserving any of the rainwater that we are getting. If we help the rainwater conserving the rainwater properly, so we'll have our ground tables recharged, which will help solve half our problems again. Like if the water table is recharged, in case of Hyderabad, half of the places here are having water problems. The water needs to be transported. The water needs to be transported from some water body. Then it has to be purified. It has to be made proper for usage and then transport. So basically, if we talk about, as I was talking about, if we conserve the rainwater that we're getting, like from the rooftops, we can conserve water from the pathways. All this basically is helping us recharge now the groundwater level. At the same time, if we have a lot of ground coverage, we can have swales and such kind of landscape materials that can be provided again, which will help us recharge the water table under, and then it can be used for the usage of the building. And at the same time, the gray water that is released from the building can be again reused in a way and treated and reused again. So basically, we are promoting green infrastructure here so that we are minimizing the carbon emissions by purifying water and industrial context. We're trying to cut here. So that is a way that you can balance the water levels and help increase. Help attain water stability in a building. Lesser impact on our atmosphere. So some materials like bamboo, mud blocks, timber, these can be used for construction, because when at times of demolition, concrete is not a biodegradable material. So it basically is impacting the earth. When we talk about impacting the earth, the soil is getting damaged, then there is no point of growing greenery, because that is a dead soil again. So we need to provide materials which basically are going to help you strike the balance there. Okay, then one more important thing that can be done is solid waste management. Now here, nowadays, every building is trying to do their own waste collection. When you so they are segregating materials when it is waste materials, and there's a proper hierarchy. So now once the segregation is done, what we do is whatever is need to be reused and recycled is going in that sector. When we come up to solid waste management, we can also use proper biogas plants where there is a huge amount of solid disposal, which can be used to generate your electricity and all those things. So when we depend on natural sources than artificial, we're basically striking the balance and getting a carbon neutral or a carbon reducing the carbon footprint of a building. So once we do that, we are actually helping the 2 degree that is increasing today by dropping it. So basically, if we make a green building today, it is going to be having a less impact on the atmosphere, and it is basically going to strike a balance. So basically here you see we have proper disposal of wastage, which can be reused as recycled, then which is solid waste is going to into a solid waste area. So there's a proper movement that is provided in each societies nowadays, which is one step to the green, I would say. Then basically, as I would like to conclude this by saying that basically for any building operation to reduce its energy, we need to strike a balance or a target. It should be that the energy target on the site should be low and carbon energy by striking a balance between off construction and prior to construction balance. If that is struck, we would actually help reach the goal and strike a balance by reducing the carbon footprint at a building level. Thank you.
Rajneesh Sareen. So he's working as the Program Director for Sustainable Habitat Program with the Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. He's having a working experience of around 21 years in sustainability and in the built environment, and is leading programs, several research, advocacy, and capacity building initiatives on sustainable urbanization, resource efficiency, cooling action plan, cities micro action plans for sectors like air pollution, livability indices, construction and demolition waste, and its associated impacts, network of green educational campuses, etc. Prior to this, he was associated with various national, bilateral, and multilateral agencies like British High Commission, American Embassy, and Worldwide Fund for Nature. An urban and environmental planner from School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and an IEMA certified Advanced Environmental Systems Auditor. Welcome, sir. Please continue your presentation.
What exactly the world where we are right now needs to change, and the thought and the perceptions needs to be worked at. But in fact, I will take a little step back also, and give you a report card of what is happening. So that's how the presentation has been aligned at. So let me just give you a currently what exactly we expect when we say climate change is coming to us. So climate change is approaching into two different modalities. One, in any case, is a heavy rain. So the finance minister, what we call is the weather which we have in our country, that is taking extreme turns at this stage. And in fact, you see untimely rains as is the amount of the rains. As we are speaking, we do see that there are certain areas in our country still getting flooded. So we need to adapt. We need to be more resilient. Our structures and our thought process, and in fact, to great extent, our way we plan urban, we need to have a drastic change which is coming. We expect that change to be coming. Then another element which becomes very important for us to focus on, and in fact, both the speakers have already given stress on, is that the temperatures are shooting up and there is more hotter days. That means now, in fact, your third skin or your envelopes or the way we design and how we're going to structure the balance of green and the gray matters which we are building, how these balance will be striked at. And this is going to decide how the future is going to be likely. Because you can easily refer to that how the cooling degree days are fluctuating within our country. So it'll clearly tell you that, for example, today, this year, I may have a carbon neutral or energy efficient building. But tomorrow, if the baseline of the weather or the temperature conditions varies, my consumption will start rising automatically because my baseline is now shifting. So these are some of the impacts which we see, which is going to come in future, and that's how we need to correspond to those requirements. And these report cards are right in front of you. So heat waves, the marathon, which is there, for example, the number of deaths which are increasing. So these are some of the facts which brings this information back onto the table, that we as designer, planners, as engineers, we need to strike a chord onto that this is a requirement which we need to cater, and this is a performance requirement for us to work on it. Now, there is an adaptation as a word which I'm using in my presentation. Now, this is something we are trying to adapt, and there are certain definitions for it. But let's see, there are two kinds of adaptations which are there. What is the autonomous adaptation or the reactive adaptations, which gradually comes with the systems and the connections which is there. And then there is an anticipatory or a proactive adaptation which we're doing. So, for example, if there is an anticipatory or a proactive adaptation, so country will start showing a response, like for example, our NDCs and things like those. And there's autonomous are the one where people start building something, a gradual change into their, maybe the way they design, the kind of material they will use, they will start changing a trend onto the market. So I'm going to touch across both the sides of the things. So recently in 2019, India got its first India cooling plan. which actually gives you a trajectory, which is a summation of whatever we have discussed so far. So what are we looking at? We are looking at a climate appropriate building envelopes. That means all our knowledge of architecture, planning, and as well as to great extent the civil engineering, which is associated with the materials, these needs to go into it. Second, there is another important component is called the Energy Conservation Building Code, which was there more for commercial popular, but now there is a residential unit which is also come in. So that means the residential spaces also needs to, which is a larger sector where the maximum construction is happening, they also needs to be attuned to these ECBC requirements. And third is adoption of adaptive thermal comfort place practices. Now there are certain things which are already prescribed. So we are going to see that how these prescriptions are working according to the current way of thought process which we have, right? So recently, yesterday only, or rather a day before yesterday, the order has been moved and our guidelines which we follow, which is the 2014, has been amended recently. Yesterday or day before yesterday, they have been amended. So what they were asking us is climate responsive building design and adaptive design techniques, which needs to be followed. And not only they are giving you suggestions, they are asking ULBs, Urban Development Authority, to start making the plans to respond to this, and as well as lockdown cooling strategy. So what I can say is now this is something where we are internalizing these requirements, and now we are pushing an action towards it that we should, as a country, as an institution, as a profession, we should start making an alignment according to those requirements. Okay, now let's see that. So the first part of the presentation will talk about the kind of development which we're seeing. So this is primarily happening in your Hyderabad, where thermal comfort is a combination of design and choice of material. So I'm looking at, this is the kind of huge extent of housing or the kind of development which we are looking. So why talking about this becomes important? Look at the impact. It's around 15,660 houses, which means roughly around 62,000 residents. So any wrong decision on design planning, and if it's not in tune with the ICAP or the cooling action plan, imagine this, these people are going to live in this kind of condition for next 70 years. So that means a leapfrog has to happen here. Similar condition, for example, if you pick it up from Jaipur, typically it is around roughly deciding one design decision of a design decide the future of around 12,000 residents roughly for next 50 or 60 years till they occupy the structure. So these structures live longer than humans also, and sometimes these structures live beyond the capacities which they have been originally designed as well. So what we have done a series of publications which are looking into energy efficiency, thermal comfort, like for example, optimizing the third skin is one. Beyond the four walls of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, this actually talks about the combination, how it's coming into PMAY. Then we have worked on to fiscal strategies also on affordable housing to see that how we can internalize the thermal comfort, the ECBC and other such requirements into the protocols. So it has given us a kind of a landscape that, okay, a single decision of what material or what design you choose has an impact on front and back. So for example, the material which you decide will have an impact on embroidered in every part, as well as it will have a relationship with the operational needs and requirement which is going to be there. So almost a combination which is being presented. So that means the central part, or where the architectural services or where the skill decisions, they are the one who decides on to what is going to be there, the front and the backward relationship. So we need to be more conscious about these requirements. But how conscious are we? We are moving from brick straight away to the cement or the concrete, right? Even with the 60% higher cost, we are moving on to a kind of a material which is more heat intensive structures, right? So are we moving towards the direction as is was expected by me or as well as by the speakers who were talking about carbon neutral and the kind of dimension? So that means the economic is not giving the room or variability to the kind of, is actually making a space for the kind of structure which may be fast packed, which may be good in quality, but they may not be very climate adaptive. And that's where the topic is. That we are looking at something which needs to adapt and work according to the extreme climatical conditions which we are looking at. But the kind of development which is coming in front of us is pushing into a different thought process or into a different direction. So which needs to have a correction coming. And this is not the landscape which is there in Hyderabad or in few towns. I'll give you a report card that it actually follows these links throughout in India. So for example, now, so the lack of performance standard is actually giving room to a bad to make a entry into our systems, right? So that means somewhere we need to have a corrective course of action that, for example, the demand which is coming from the externality factors in terms of climate change, as well as the kind of demand which is coming from our new policy perspective, we need to start internalizing. We traveled across Gurgaon, Faridabad, Kota, Panchkula, Jodhpur, Udaipur, Jaipur, Kolkata to understand that what is this kind of construction are we into it. We pick up the RERA database and look into the construction. And what we found is, like, you see, like, for example, the My1 is taking, even in the smaller towns, the kind of concrete heaviness is coming and making a place. Still, they are dominated by the bricks as well as the tight structure. But when it comes to the bigger towns like Delhi, NCR, Bangalore and all, so you would see that there is a lot of impact or lot of transition has already happened towards the concrete structure, which with only concrete, simple concrete, without having any other layer to protect you from the harsh weather, will definitely have challenges. And that's where we try to work and understand the envelopes with it. So there are various things which we worked at. I am looking at the time and as well as the space which is given to me. I will suggest that you should refer to any of our presentation or any of our publication which I refer. You will get a complete detailed outlook of what we are speaking and how these contexts has been arrived. Now there's another area during the COVID period which was shown to us is something called green recovery. Now, if we have to recover, construction sector becomes one of the prominent space because it's going to improve the thermal comfort, it's going to improve the living condition, as well as there is a lot of potential for maximizing the livelihood which is going to come. So we picked up two regions, West Bengal and Orissa, because those were like amongst those 5 states where the reverse migration happened. To understand, okay, what are the things? Like, for example, today we are doing this webinar, and because it's a virtual, there's no tea which is going to be served to you. So I'm serving a tea cup to you, and I'm going to bring up those ingredients so that it gives you a good flavor of, right? So the flavor is like housing sector, self-construction dominates and regulates the guidance. So that means this is my saucer where I'm going to collect everything into it. 70% of this construction typology is coming in this area. Self-build, for example, is dominating and is being the informal sector or small enterprises are the one which is making the base for it. Then green recovery, for example, right now what we are looking at indigenous labor intensive, green, local and self-reliant as one of the parameters which we need to add into it. And the fifth vertical, even for example, from PMAY has shown us a little financial rooms. Like, for example, there is something called TIG, Technical Innovation Grant, as well as Viability Gap Funding, which can actually service and brings these green coming onto the ground. So that means some green financing options or green terminologies are now making a shape into our housing as one of the important things. So we've done literatures. We've gone through PMAY, literature reviews, census, expected the mapping. So expectations was mapped and skilled were mapped to understand, okay, whatever we are perceiving that this India is going to make a dent in this direction, are we really prepared? Do we have that information of the resources, the capacities, the skills which needs to drive this action? So we've gone through it. I will not present each and every detail, but maybe you can utilize these slides later on to have an understanding of it, that understand what is the market penetration of these products or the kind of materials which we are on. So we've gone through the census, we've gone through the PMAY, understood that, okay, there is a demand. There definitely lies a demand of our old technique or indigenous techniques also to great extent. But unfortunate part for that is that somewhere we are not connecting these two subjects together. So I'm going to make those pitch to you. Like, for example, from many of you are from architecture, and we do understand there are various such techniques which are prevalent all across India in terms of walling, in terms of roofing. I'm just giving you a little slide change where the names are coming to you. So these all, in fact, where Dr. Reddy is sitting, his rooftop is also one of those indigenous technologies which are being promoted, or which should be promoted largely as a retrofit or as a sandwich between, because they are the one who has been more adaptive to the kind of climatical condition which exists in this country. But unfortunately, we are forgetting those. So there are various such which we documented. If I give you a little more detail into documentation, if I open up Orissa in front of you, so we have these 14 technology on wall, and for example, roof, we have multiple technology. We map them across in every district also. So it's a kind of a repository which is going to come soon in front of you in terms of where you can have this exchange and understand, okay, these are the materials, these are the sciences which are available. Imagine Orissa is such a beautiful place where the tribal population is extensive, and tribal population has their own way of construction, understanding and internalization of the construction practices also. So, but somewhere we were losing it out. So these are something which we are trying to mainframe. So what we have done is we have done a technological classification for self-built housing. So even the alternate technology, which are the new one, the neo-sustainable as well as traditional, they all roughly around 30 technologies has been put across to see that where are they and how are they being manufactured. We are even coming up with to-do kind of practices also, that you identify a technology, understand what are the steps which is going to be there in order to, so that people, the kind of initial issues and concerns which we have, how to do it, could get solved. Because the reason is we've done expert analysis, we've done expert analysis and understood, because there is ancestral knowledge which is coming. So that means our technical institutions, we map them to understand how these kind of technologies needs to be made part and frame of the future requirements which we are looking at. Because until unless, see, it's good to talk about thermal comfort, it's good to talk about energy efficiency, but until unless you make that platform which makes this job easier for people to pick it up, people are not interested in research. People are interested in maybe you pick and drop items. You give them selections and they can select it. But if you ask them to go and research, they may not be. So what we are doing is we're giving them those selections which makes their life easier. Understand where these demonstration centers are. We've done a mass survey to understand the penetration. Like, people, are you interested? So there is an awareness of material which clearly shows up to us. There is, for example, the people are interested and willing to have their house constructed from the kind of technology which are climate adapted, and they are ready to spend more. But unfortunately, the information which is there in the market, or the connection of the network which needs to be there in the market, is not there. So what at CSC we are doing, we are bringing up a kind of dashboard to you. So for example, you pick up a region where you belong to and you want to do a house construction, you pick up roof penetration on wall, it starts populating those traditional as well as other materials, emerging technologies in front of you. How they look, you pick it up choice from there. It automatically shows a video, audio write-up for it. And moment you have that, so you have that interface which is right in front of you. So this generation, which is the new generation which is there, they need these kind of tools to make the jobs much easier. So you connect them with the location, you connect with them with the cost, you connect them with those people who are there in that network and are actually doing these jobs for you. So this solves a lot of questions which are there in the drawing room discussions most of the time before deciding a project. So we need to make this journey very easy, and that's where the CSC is looking and making a step towards. But our humble submission to all people who are attending and listening to us is that there is a great opportunity for skilling on climate appropriate materials. Please, let's work on this. Plenty of knowledge resource on climate appropriate materials is there, but it needs to be tapped. Fast switch towards modern technology needs to be regulated properly, because we are a country which is dependent, our economy is also depending on these construction and the way we do it. And there is huge amount of knowledge which is there in our informal sector, which needs to be mobilized. With these four main area for us to future or maybe deliberate at, I end my submission and I bring it back to the organizer so that they can continue with the next proceeds.
Thank you very much, Rajneesh Tareen. Indeed, your presentation brought up the values, especially vernacular architecture, traditional sciences in buildings, the material that are used, including you appreciated our Earth Center, the tiles that we use are Mangalore tiles, clay tiles, and we also adopted the rammed earth wall. You could see in the background of where our banner is located, that is a rammed earth wall. This is a very traditional, only 8% cement we used, and the rest is 50-50, the local soil and sand we used. And they have very good life, as well as we feel the most comfortable situation we have here with respect to the warmth or the temperature or coolness in the building. And with this kind of architecture, we have very good ventilation. This is just our Earth Center, because habitats and climate change, it is not just preaching, but how we live in our own Earth Center. That's why I'm explaining. Otherwise, your presentation was very good. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next speaker. So I request Professor Sarmada Madhulika Kone. She is also from School of Sri Venkateshwara College of Architecture faculty. She has done more from Master of Planning in Urban Development from Maulana Azad National Institute of Technology, Bhopal. And also she has done Bachelor of Architecture from School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada. And she has done from IIIT Hyderabad postgraduate program in remote sensing. Thank you, madam. Please carry on here with your talk.
I feel privileged to share my views on this platform today. Um, since we have professionals and students from various backgrounds, so rather than presenting some technical information, I would like to highlight certain key aspects um, of urban green conservation, which we all know, but yet we tend to forget. And despite knowing its significance, we end up ignoring them due to various spatio-political reasons that stand as our limitations. So we all know how much we depend on natural resources, and today urban environments are polluted to an extent that pure air and clean living conditions are a luxury. They became a luxury in cities. So if you look at the global ecological footprint, the ecological footprint is nothing but a metric that measures human demand on natural capital, given that there is a limitation for regeneration capacity of Earth. So in 2021, the ecological footprint is for an average, in average for a person is 2.71 global hectares, whereas the biocapacity is 1.63 global hectares. So there is a deficit in the pattern we are consuming our natural resources. It shows that the rate which we are consuming resources is way more faster than the rate the earth is regenerating resources, and which is pushing us into a deficit period. So the earth overshoot day is nothing but a day on which we are completely consuming or exhausting our natural resources and entering the deficit period. So we can see here on 1970, we took an year to complete our natural resources that earth is regenerating in a year. And slowly, as the year passes by, the deficit period is increasing. Whatever the reasons might be, maybe the population is increasing, or maybe maybe we are consuming more resources to maintain nature-like environments, or in our attempt to build nature-like environments in polluted urban environments, maybe we are ending up consuming more resources. Whatever the reason might be, we are entering deficit period faster year by year. And on 2020, we can see the overshoot day, it's postponed a little bit due to the lockdown and very decrease in the carbon emissions. Coming to India's ecological footprint on 2021, it's 1.16 global hectares per person, whereas the biocapacity of Indian landscapes or Indian region is 0.45. We can see that the green line is the biocapacity per person, whereas the red line shows the ecological footprint, which is increasing year by year. And we can also notice that there is a decrease in the biocapacity per person. So if this figure explains us how the human settlements are actually transforming our natural landscapes. If we try to understand, there are two basic entities or features, two basic features in our ecosystems, which are biotic and abiotic. And we all know that these biotic features are interdependent on among themselves, and also depends on the abiotic features, which are nothing but our environmental settings. So in natural landscape, the consumption patterns there is an equity in the consumption of natural resources by the species in natural landscapes, including man. Whereas in urban scapes or in cities, man is also consuming resources not just for his physiological needs, maybe for his luxuries, maybe for other Maslow's other needs which Maslow's triangle or pyramid of needs explains. So, and what's happening, how we are ending up, or how this transformation is affecting our landscapes is, this human-centric transformation is resulting in an encroachment of our local biodiversity. And we can see that the only species which are well adapted to our urban settings are seen irrespective of geographical location and climatic zone. So this human-centric approach, where keeping man at the center of urban design, or while designing open spaces, or while planning open space systems or green systems, green infrastructural systems or green networks, if we keep man at the center, then we are actually harming our local biodiversity, and in return we are harming ourselves. So this timeline explains us how the idea of conservationism evolved over the pre and post industrial revolutions. In the pre-industrial revolution era, the issues are generally, I mean, they are deforestation as a result of agricultural practices and preparing for the launch of industrial revolution. So the idea of conservationism revolved around the protection of forests and tree cover. And during the industrial revolution phase, where consumption of fossil fuels to generate energy is increased and mass migration to factory towns is observed, and the inefficiency in the management of disposals from industries, which led to air and water pollution and leading to an unhealthy living environment, are the major issues observed during the industrial revolution phase. So the conservation revolved around fighting the industrial pollution. Though we focused on stopping our natural systems being polluted from our industrial waste disposal, we didn't actually, the adverse effects on environment weren't seen as, they were seen as localized and short-lived. We didn't take them seriously. And in some regions, environmentalism is also seen as a romanticism. Now, today, the conservation idea is based on a utilitarian conservation, preservationist conservation, and wildlife habitat protection. These are the three major principles on which we based on and build the idea of conservation is built or evolved from. So it focused on, it actually focused on the ecological conservation, green growth, our practices and sustainable approaches in development, energy efficient strategies, circular economy, conservation of lakes and catchment areas, efficient urban service provision and management, environmental equity, environmental justice, urban ecology. So it completely changed from just protecting the urban green or urban forests, from developing or transforming our urban systems into resilient systems which can adapt to mitigation and flexible enough to adopt the change. So urban green conservation demands a systems approach to address these issues that we face today in cities. So now coming to our Indian context, what India is exactly doing, and what India is focusing on through its climate mitigation strategies and sustainable practices and conservation practices, it can be clearly and easily understood from the assessment framework it adopted. This city center for climate center for cities is launched by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs to drive the climate action in cities. So it's a self-assessment framework which cities can assess their results of their greenhouse gas mitigation. So we can see that there are 5 parameters it focused on, which are mobility and air quality, waste management, water management, urban planning, green cover and biodiversity, energy and green buildings. So the first assessment done by the climate smart city assessment framework has recommended certain gave some recommendations to the smart cities or the cities of India, which under these 5 indicators, it assesses the climate smartness in the Indian cities under these 5 indicators and gave some recommendations. The 5 indicators are the rejuvenation and conservation of water bodies and open spaces, urban biodiversity, and proportion of green cover. Sorry. And if we see that these 3 parameters fall under the climate adaptation and disaster resilience and city climate action plan. These 2 fall under climate mitigation. So it's actually targeting both the aspects. So the rejuvenation and conservation of water bodies and open spaces assess the extent of conservation of urban environment to decrease the urban heat island effect. So it recommends the cities to consider the transformation of urban green that's happening in the cities. So it asks the cities to consider look at its master plans and see how the green spaces are transforming, how the green networks are maybe being fragmented by the new development projects. So by referring the master plan, it recommends the cities to understand or assess the conservation and also plan the strategies in the master plan level itself to conserve the water bodies that can combat the urban heat island effect. And under urban biodiversity, it assesses the extent the city is acting for protection, conservation, and management of urban biodiversity. So it asks these cities to maintain an inventory of urban systems. It asks cities to understand what character of biodiversity exists in their cities and what's happening to them. How are they changing? How is the biodiversity being affected across the timeline? And it asks cities to regularly monitor as well as mitigate the impact of human interference into the urban activities, interference of urban activities into the local biodiversity. And under the proportion of green cover, it measures it's nothing but the percentage of green cover in the urban region or in the urban development region. So it considers both the natural and planted vegetation. So it's just a metric which measures the percentage of urban green cover. And under climate mitigation, we have disaster resilience and city climate action plan. So under disaster resilience, it recommends cities to prepare a disaster management plan, considering the detailed ward level hazardous vulnerability and capacity assessment. So it asks cities to reflect the local microclimatic conditions and disaster resilience into their bylaws, development control regulations, codes, and build cities a bit more resilient for any change and flexible enough to adapt to the change. So it asks the city administrations to update this disaster management plan on a yearly basis. And under the city climate action plan, it shall be developed as a comprehensive implementation plan covering all sectors. So we can see that an inclusive approach being adopted by Indian local bodies. Maybe at least the attempt starting to adopt an inclusive approach in climate action, where it's considering waste management, integrated water management, mobility, air pollution, energy and green buildings, biodiversity, green cover, disaster risk preparedness, urban planning, and others. So, as an inclusive approach is a right step towards the mitigating the climate change at local level. And there is another index, but if we can notice, if you try to see, if you try to look at the urban planning, green cover, and biodiversity indicator, it talks more on conserving the biodiversity regions. It stresses more on the percentage of green cover. That's it. It doesn't talk about what's happening to urban green network. It doesn't adopt a systems approach. It's just seeing the metrics or percentage of green cover. So let us try to understand what urban open spaces and urban green spaces actually cater to in cities. So if we see, there are two primary needs it caters to: urban open spaces as well as green spaces. One is socio-ecological needs of human beings and ecological needs of biodiversity. So urban designers or planners or architects, when if I request them to adopt approach which considers local biodiversity as well when we are designing open spaces. So and based on the needs it caters to, we can frame the objectives while designing the urban green systems. So minimum open spaces per capita, which are accessible and well managed to accommodate the social interactions, cultural activities, and ecological needs of the human beings. So this is catering to the human needs. And looking at the biodiversity needs, conservation of local biodiversity, well-maintained green networks to allow the species to maintain, sustain, and regenerate their vital cycles. So we should redefine the human-centric approach to an approach which considers both the human and the local biodiversity, and design for a coexistence where both the human and local biodiversity can sustain and can cohabit in the urban regions. So based on the if we try to understand, urban open spaces and green spaces are only spaces which allow man to interact with nature from cities. So considering the interference of man in urban regions, we can categorize the urban green spaces into three categories. One is high degree of human interference, moderate degree of human interference, and no human interference. So if we see, under no human interference, we have green spaces like protected areas, urban forests, conservation zones, natural reserves, and green belts. So these are the areas which are strictly protected and conserved, and where no human activity is allowed, where no spaces are designed for human activities. And in moderate degree of human interference, under moderate degree of human interference, we have gardens, biodiversity parks, where we can see spaces where for man as well as for the local biodiversity. And high degree of human interference, we have parks, playgrounds, and urban open spaces where majority of spaces are designed for human socio-cultural activities. So if we try to understand what type of issues these spaces are facing today, fragmentation of habitats and encroachment of local biodiversity, these are the two major issues. Our urban area, protected areas, urban forests, conservation zones, and where no human interference is there, this is the major issue these type of spaces are facing. And management of coexistence, where properly managing the coexistence of both the species is a major challenge for moderate degree of human interference. And for spaces where there is a high degree of interference, the common issues are the accessibility and insufficient green spaces. So these are the common issues we can identify rather than generalizing the issues to urban green spaces overall. We can categorize the spaces in terms of human interference, and we can identify what issues these spaces are facing today in urban regions. Yeah, if we see the pictures here, this is the landscape with high patch connectivity, and this is the landscape fragmented by the road, reducing the connectivity. So now this gives the idea, or this helps us to understand how the human settlements are fragmenting the habitat. Now, if we see the percentage of green, it's same here, almost same. And if we see the areas that are being conserved, might be almost same, but it's definitely breaking the network. So considering the percentage of open spaces alone can be a risk, and we can it will be very difficult for us to assess our strategies in addressing the local biodiversity issues. So green network systems are widely seen as key mechanism for reversing the effects of fragmentation on biodiversity. So it requires a systems approach, considering the entire green spaces as a single structure and a single system as one of the subsystems of urban systems, and approaching and developing strategies could be an ideal approach. So the adoption of a green networks approach offers a more effective strategy over simply increasing the amount of green space. And they emphasize the interaction between species and landscape structure in determining organism movement among the habitat patches. This is a small theoretical concept, which is a patch corridor matrix, which says that every point on the landscape is either a patch, network, or a background matrix. Patches are nothing but the nonlinear areas or nonlinear surfaces or zones whose landscape is different from its surrounding landscape. So now in our context, these patches are green landscapes which are differing from the surrounding landscapes which are urban landscapes. And networks are the linear elements which often connect these patches. And from structural perspective, they sometimes might not be connecting patches, but they do facilitate the survivorship and species movement when we look at the functional perspective. So this figure explains us. This is the condition of our urban network systems in our cities today, where we have broken networks, not well distributed green open spaces, fragmented conservation zones, etc. Whereas this is what we want to achieve, where everything is the green open spaces are integrated well, and which is allowing or species movement, and which helps the regeneration of biodiversity in our urban areas. So our vision forward should adopt a systems approach and consider the entire urban green structure while developing a conservation and climate mitigation strategies. And it is necessary to consider, and while designing, we usually end up focusing on spatial aspects and ecological aspects while designing strategies for urban green spaces or urban open spaces. But it is very important to consider the local norms and spatio-political aspects as well, because they might end up as limitations when it comes to the implementation phase. So it is important to consider spatial, ecological, socio-cultural, and political dimensions of green systems, urban green systems. Thus, which implies that strategies need to be localized. A centralized So when strategies and programs are formulated at central level, they cannot be directly implemented as it is and cannot be copy pasted everywhere. So it is very important to localize our strategies and concepts which suits to our local conditions. Um, Thus, considering local political framework is very important from designing phase. So the objectives, that's the vision forward, and the objectives of urban green management plan is to combine biodiversity and social networks. So since our open spaces are not just for man or not just for biodiversity, so we need the coexistence, we need the cohabitation. So to combine biodiversity and social networks with other social and environmental data sets, and then identify opportunities for improving the extent and usability of urban green networks for biodiversity and people.
Good, madam. Your presentation covered the broad spectrum of conservation, urban greenery, and different spaces within the urban areas. So it was a comprehensive presentation and it was very good. Thank you very much.